Today I just want to throw some light into what's going on in the northern part of Nigeria. My attention was drawn to somebody's contribution to that. So I read what that man wrote. That is Khalid Yazidu, a Hausa man. He said that he has looked into the historical records written by scholars about the Sokoto Caliphate. So I read, I have discovered a great and harsh truth. The truth is that after Usman dan Fodio and his Fulani warriors seized the Hausa kingdoms, they turned the Hausa people into slaves. This was not an accident or a mistake. It was a carefully planned system. Its purpose was to destroy the dignity of the Hausa people, to remove them from power, and to force them to become slaves in their own land. What was that system? After conquering the Hausa kingdoms, the Fulani didn't leave the Hausa people in peace. They captured thousands of Hausa men, women, and children and turned them into slaves. Then they sold them in large slave markets they established within the Caliphate. A major such market was located in the city of Kano. A researcher named Charles Robinson visited Kano about 1896 and witnessed slaves being sold in the Kano market, where as many as 500 could be seen being sold in a single day. The slaves sold in the Kano market were mostly Hausa people captured in slave raids from surrounding villages and towns. As a result of this system, it is estimated that within the Sokoto Caliphate, approximately 2.5 to 5 million people were captured and turned into slaves. This number represented about 50% of the total population of the Caliphate at the time. To understand the scales of this slavery, one study estimated that if all the slaves within the Sokoto Caliphate were gathered together, they could fill the entire city of London. This enslavement of the Hausa people, scholars have stated, became the second largest market system in the world in the 19th century, surpassing almost every other form of slavery in African history. What were the methods of the Fulanis? There were several methods used to enslave the Hausa people after the jihad. First, they continued to launch raids on Hausa villages and towns. A report from that period stated that the annual tax the Emir of Kano paid to the Sultan of Sokoto was paid in slaves. And the painful truth was that those slaves were all captured from surrounding Hausa villages. This led to continuous warfare within the land, as raids were constantly launched against Hausa villages to capture slaves. The slave raids were on such a scale that they devastated and nearly wiped out communities from large areas, surrounding and disrupting trade in many cities like Kano and Zaria. Secondly, large plantations were established within the Caliphate, and captured Hausa people were forced to work on these plantations. A historian, Mohammed Bachir Salau, wrote in detail about the plantation system in Fanisau in Hausa land, where thousands of Hausa people were sent to work as slaves on farms. The expansion of plantation agriculture under the Sokoto Caliphate depended entirely on slave labor. Thirdly, a system of royal slaves was established. These were slaves who were considered high-ranking and given military and administrative positions. But despite this status, they remained slaves of the king and were part of the slavery system. This system caused many Hausa people to enter the governance structure of the Caliphate, but as slaves, not as free. What was the impact of that? This enslavement after the jihad caused a terrible impact on Hausa society that we still face today, according to the author. First, the wealth of the Hausa people was looted. Their farms were seized, their homes were seized, their properties were seized, and given to the Fulani, who participated in the jihad. This made the Hausa people beggars in their own land. Secondly, the dignity of the Hausa people was destroyed. Before the jihad, the Hausas had kings who ruled for over 800 years, but after the jihad, the Hausa kings were replaced with Fulani emirs. The Hausa became common subjects under the Fulani rule. This made the Hausa people lose their dignity in the eyes of the world. Thirdly, the Hausas were enslaved in their own land. Millions of them suffered at the hands of the Fulani as slaves. They were sold in markets, forced to work on plantations, and turned into communities. This slavery caused the Hausas to fall behind economically, educationally, and developmentally. What was the attitude of the British? When the British conquered the Sokoto Caliphate in 1903, they discovered the slavery system that the Fulani had established. But according to the author, instead of abolishing this system, they allied with the Fulani and allowed the slavery system to continue under colonial rule. The British used the Fulani as instrument of indirect rule and allowed them to continue enslaving the Hausas. This allowed slavery to continue until the early 20th century. The Usman and Fodio Caliphate sold Hausa people as slaves after seizing the Hausa kingdoms. This is not a lie, that is the author talking. This is not a fabrication. This is the truth that many historians have documented. Even today, we are still suffering the consequence of that. Therefore, it's our duty to know our history, to understand what was done to us, and to strive to reclaim our rights. This is the historical truth. This is what was done to our ancestors, and this is the reason why we must stand up, take control of our destiny, and build a better future for the Hausa people. And I want to add that a search on the internet seems to give reasons to the author. According to the Google, the Sokoto Caliphate 1804-1903 was a powerful independent Sunni Muslim state in West Africa, founded by Fulani scholar Usman and Fodio following the Fulani War, and it covered parts of modern Nigeria, Niger, Burkina, Cameroon. It was West Africa's largest pre-colonial empire and a major center of Islamic learning and activity. And what it said was that by 1837, that empire included 10 to 20 million people, relying heavily on slave labor for agriculture, domestic work, and military campaigns. So what I want to suggest is that you look into this, because it's interesting, because we know that actually the Fulanis are not only maltreating Christians and Southerners in the north, but also their own people. And it would be interesting to look into it. This is a call for scholars. Don't neglect that topic. Don't neglect that domain. The Fulanis need to be studied more intensely.